The world had known peace for generations. Humanity had mastered technology, explored the stars, and created alliances that spanned continents. Earth was united, not by the promise of absolute harmony, but by the understanding that division would be its downfall. The human race had made great strides, until one fateful morning. Without warning, the skies darkened. At first, it seemed like an ominous storm, an anomaly in the atmosphere. But as the hours passed, the truth became undeniable. Massive ships, each larger than any city on Earth, hovered just above the clouds. The ships were a sleek, metallic black, glimmering in the light, with sharp edges that resembled the teeth of a beast. As the first moments of terror gripped the globe, governments scrambled to react. The UN, the European Union, the Asian Coalition, every major political body rushed into emergency meetings. But there was no clear answer, no plan that could deal with an invasion of this scale. The leader of the alien force, a being called King Vorthan, made himself known within hours. His voice crackled through the airwaves, reverberating in every city, every home. His message was simple but chilling. Humans of Earth, his voice boomed, cold and mechanical. We are the Zoltrax. You have no choice but to surrender. Your resources are ours. Your cities are ours. Your planet is ours. If you refuse, we will annihilate your kind. This is your only warning. Submit or perish. His words were followed by the unmistakable sounds of energy blasts, destroying landmarks and cities across the globe. Washington, New York, London, Paris, all were hit in rapid succession. The attacks were surgical, precise, designed to instill fear and shock. The humans had no chance to respond. No weapon on Earth could match the technology the Zoltrax wielded. For the first time in modern history, the entire planet felt the weight of true, unrelenting terror. The leaders of the world, who once spoke of peace and progress, were powerless. Their military technology was no match for the overwhelming power of the Zoltrax ships. As the dust settled from the first attacks, humanity's greatest strength, its unity, began to unravel. Governments floundered in the face of an invasion they could not comprehend, let alone combat. Leaders gave speeches, promising that they would not surrender, but the truth was clear. The very survival of humankind was in jeopardy. In the midst of the devastation, a young woman named Tara Velen watched the broadcast from her small apartment. She had been a strategist in the military before the invasion, but her career had been nothing compared to the urgency she now felt. Tara's face was hard, her jaw clenched in determination. Her family lived in a small town that was now nothing but rubble, a casualty of the Zoltrax's early strikes. She knew, without a doubt, that humanity was not prepared for this war. The governments may have been paralyzed, but the people, the survivors, had strength they could never have anticipated. In the hours that followed, Tara reached out to old contacts, to those she knew would be willing to fight. The military was crippled, but ordinary people, survivors, could still fight back. And fight they would. Across the globe, whispers began to circulate. We won't submit. It was the beginning of something much larger than anyone could have predicted. The first seeds of resistance were planted. While the Zoltrax watched, waiting for humanity's inevitable surrender, the human spirit, though frightened, was far from broken. King Vorthan's demands for submission had been heard, but they had not been accepted. The war had begun, and the outcome was no longer certain. The days following the Zoltrax's brutal invasion were marked by uncertainty and fear. Governments collapsed under the weight of the alien onslaught, their leaders struggling to maintain any semblance of control. Cities burned, and millions of people disappeared without a trace. The world was on the brink of annihilation. Yet, in the midst of this chaos, something unexpected began to stir. Commander Tara Velen had lost everything, her family, her home, and her previous life as a military strategist. But she hadn't lost her will to fight. When the Zoltrax decimated her town, She vowed that she wouldn't allow their reign of terror to go unchallenged. The government's paralysis had left a gaping hole, and Terra knew that if humanity stood a chance, it would have to rise from the ashes of its former institutions. Terra's first step was to gather a small, disparate group of survivors. They were engineers, soldiers, scientists, and civilians, each with a specific skill set, each with a reason to hate the invaders. They found each other through underground networks, through word of mouth. The alien threat was universal, and the desire to resist transcended borders and nationalities. Soon, Terra's group became something more. A nucleus of defiance, the spark for a fire that would spread across the globe. They began with simple, yet effective acts of sabotage. Communications were intercepted, supply chains were attacked, and alien technology was stolen. These were small victories, but each one proved that humanity had the will to resist. Each success was broadcasted to the world through underground media channels, fueling a growing wave of defiance. The more the aliens pushed, the harder humans pushed back. Terra was quick to see the potential in their first success. A group of her resistance fighters managed to hack into one of the Zoltrax's communication satellites. The footage they intercepted revealed something humanity had not yet realized. Kane Vorthan, the alien ruler, was not untouchable. He was a dictator, yes, but even he could be vulnerable if his empire's infrastructure crumbled. This realization was a game changer. It wasn't just about brute force anymore. It was about intelligence, strategy, and resourcefulness. Humans couldn't hope to outmatch the Zoltrax in terms of raw power, but they could outsmart them. And this was the key. Terra had once been a brilliant military strategist, and now her expertise was exactly what humanity needed. She knew how to turn the tide in a war where the odds seemed insurmountable. But even as small victories piled up, the situation grew worse. The Zoltrax retaliated with devastating force, wiping out entire cities and relentlessly hunting down any signs of rebellion. Their brutality knew no bounds, and each wave of destruction pushed humans into ever more desperate positions. The resistance fighters faced constant danger, but their resolve remained firm. In one of the most daring raids yet, Terra and her team managed to infiltrate a Zoltrax facility, located deep within the remains of a once thriving city. Inside, they discovered a weapon, a small but powerful device capable of disrupting the Zoltrax's energy shields. It was a breakthrough. They now had a way to fight back on a larger scale. As the resistance grew stronger, so did their unity. People from all walks of life, scientists, engineers, former soldiers, and even civilians who had never fired a weapon in their lives, came together to help in whatever way they could. They knew the stakes. If humanity didn't fight, it would cease to exist. It was no longer just about survival. It was about reclaiming the planet, about showing the invaders that humans would never bow to tyranny. Terra knew they couldn't fight this war alone. She reached out to any remaining world leaders, those who had managed to survive the initial assault, hoping to form alliances to present a united front against the Zoltrax. Slowly, scattered nations began to rally behind her cause. Earth was divided, yes, but in the face of extinction, they were learning to fight together once again. And so, the resistance rose. It began with a handful of brave men and women, but as the days turned into weeks, it became a movement, a rebellion that could no longer be ignored. The aliens had come to conquer, but humanity wasn't ready to be conquered yet. The war had just begun, and with every passing day, the Zoltrax learned the true strength of the human spirit. They had underestimated Earth. They had underestimated Terra Vallon. And now, they would pay the price. The Zoltrax, having underestimated the resistance, decided to escalate their efforts. Their response was brutal and swift. Entire cities across the globe were obliterated in a single devastating attack. The invaders, confident in their technological superiority, launched wave after wave of orbital bombardments, turning thriving metropolises into craters. It was as though the sky itself had come alive with fire, raining destruction upon the earth. The world watched helplessly as civilization crumbled. Humanity's initial hope that the invaders might be reasoned with vanished as the days passed. Cain Vorthan's cruelty was on full display. His orders were clear: crush them. Leave nothing behind but ashes. His people, once regarded as conquerors of many worlds, now saw humanity as an insignificant obstacle, a pest to be exterminated without mercy. The Zoltrax's soldiers ravaged the planet's remaining infrastructure, taking whatever resources they could, enslaving those they deemed useful, and slaughtering the rest. Yet, despite the mounting horrors, something remarkable began to take shape in the heart of humanity's resistance. Every time the Zoltrax struck, the fire in the hearts of the people only grew stronger. What the invaders didn't understand was the human spirit, a spirit that refused to be extinguished. People rose from the ashes of their cities, from the rubble of their broken lives, and they fought back. Commander Terra Valen's resistance group continued to grow. What had started as a small band of survivors now operated on a global scale. It was no longer just a handful of soldiers. It was a network, a web of communication and strategy connecting survivors across continents. People from every corner of the earth, from the ruins of Africa to the smoldering remnants of North America, joined the cause. They may not have had the advanced technology of the Zoltrax, but they had something far more powerful: ingenuity, unity, and a relentless desire to reclaim their world. The Zoltrax, however, were not blind to this growing resistance. Cain Vorthan's frustration mounted with every failed strike, every corner of Earth where human rebels managed to outsmart his forces. He had never encountered an enemy like this, one that refused to break under the weight of annihilation. The invaders, as much as they tried, couldn't seem to snuff out the flame of rebellion. In one particularly harrowing attack, a Zoltrax destroyer ship attempted to flatten a major resistance base hidden deep within the mountains of South America. The aliens had thought it would be an easy target, but Terra had anticipated their every move. Using the stolen alien tech and a combination of guerrilla warfare tactics, her fighters ambushed the destroyer from all sides. The ship, caught off guard by the unexpected resistance, was damaged beyond repair. Though it wasn't a large victory in the grand scheme of things, it was a symbol, proof that the aliens could be fought, that they were not invincible. The small victory turned into a rallying point. Across the globe, people began to believe that the war was winnable. The stories of human bravery, of rebel forces outmaneuvering their alien oppressors, spread like wildfire. The power of the resistance grew. The people of Earth no longer cowered in fear. They were learning how to fight back. Commander Valen knew that they couldn't win the war with guerrilla tactics alone, though. The alien technology was still far superior, and the Zoltrax had a vast military apparatus. There had to be a bigger play, a decisive move that could shift the balance. But it would take time, effort, and a level of coordination the humans had yet to achieve. Every day they were running out of time, and every victory came at a price. But Terra wasn't ready to give up. She wasn't ready to let the aliens win. As the Zoltrax continued their assault on Earth, the resistance began to push back with greater strength, greater precision. The world was on fire, yes, but it was also beginning to burn with a new kind of hope, the hope that humanity would not simply bend to the will of their conquerors. Earth would not go down without a fight. Cain Vorthan stood before a massive holographic projection, his cold, calculating eyes staring down at the gathered assembly of Zoltrax generals and advisors. The weight of the war was starting to show on his face, but he refused to allow any hint of vulnerability. In his mind, the conquest of Earth was only a matter of time. His forces had already devastated most of the major cities, and the last remaining pockets of resistance were being systematically crushed. He was convinced that victory was imminent. Yet there was one thing that irked him. Humans refused to give up. They had surprised him in ways he hadn't expected, pushing back in ways that made no logical sense to him. He couldn't fathom why, even after so much destruction, they still fought. Perhaps it was a stubbornness bred from their primitive nature, or maybe something more, something he still couldn't grasp. But Vorthen wouldn't show weakness. He needed to remind Earth, and more importantly, his own soldiers, that he was in control. The time for negotiation was over. There was only one path left: total submission. In a moment of calculated arrogance, Vorthen decided to broadcast his message directly to the entire human population. Every network, every television screen, every device on the planet flickered to life, displaying the image of the Zoltrax king. His voice resonated with an unnerving calmness, each word dripping with disdain. "Humans of Earth," he began, his voice smooth and powerful, "you have fought valiantly, but your struggle is futile. You resist, you scream, you attempt to retaliate, but you cannot defeat the Zoltrax. Your cities lie in ruins, your forces shattered, and your leaders are cowering in fear. You are weak, and you will fall." His words were deliberate, designed to instill fear and hopelessness. "You, the so-called masters of this world, have proven no match for us. You have failed your species, your planet, and now, the final price is being paid. This is your last warning. Surrender. Bow before me, and I may allow you to live. Refuse, and the annihilation will be complete." The camera zoomed in, and Vorthen's expression grew darker. "You have no hope. You cannot win. Submit to us now, or witness the destruction of everything you have ever known. Your time is up." His broadcast was meant to crush any remaining hope, to break the spirit of humanity. But what Vorthen failed to anticipate was the power of his own arrogance. His words, meant to terrify, ignited something else entirely. As the speech concluded, an eerie silence hung in the air. Across the globe, humans watched in disbelief. King Vorthen's proclamation was met not with surrender, but with fury. People huddled together in shelters, gathering in small underground groups to discuss what they had just witnessed. His message, meant to break them, only made them more determined. In the heart of the resistance, Commander Taravallen stood, watching the broadcast with cold, unwavering eyes. A surge of adrenaline ran through her veins. This was the moment she had been waiting for. She knew the alien king had just made the mistake of underestimating humanity's resolve. "Let him gloat," she muttered to herself. "Let him believe that we are broken. We'll show him what real resistance looks like." Tara's mind raced, already formulating the next steps. The speech had galvanized the people. The entire world had heard Vorthen's declaration of dominance, and they had heard his threat. But what he didn't realize was that he had just handed humanity a powerful weapon. The truth that the alien king was not invincible. The resistance would use this. They would turn the king's arrogance against him. The people would fight harder, not just for survival, but for something greater. They would fight to prove that Earth was not a world to be conquered. They would make sure King Vorthen would regret every word he had said. Across the world, whispers of defiance spread like wildfire. The humans would not bow to this alien king. Not now. Not ever. Vorthen's words, meant to break them, had only made them stronger. Tara knew that it was time to strike. Time to take the fight directly to the Zoltrax. No more hiding. No more running. Humanity had been pushed to its limits, and now it was ready to push back with everything it had. The war had just entered a new phase, and this time, the humans would make sure Vorthen and his forces understood exactly what they were up against. For weeks, humanity had been on the defensive, battered by relentless alien assaults, and paralyzed by the overwhelming power of the Zoltrax. Every attempt to retaliate seemed futile, and the resistance was often forced into hiding, moving in the shadows to avoid complete annihilation. But the broadcast of King Vorthen's speech, filled with threats and arrogance, had lit a spark. Something changed in that moment, something that gave the scattered pockets of resistance a renewed sense of purpose. Commander Taravallen understood this shift better than anyone. The resistance no longer felt like an isolated rebellion. It had become a global movement, fueled by the collective will of humanity. No longer was it about survival. It was about reclaiming Earth from the invaders. They were tired of being victims. Now, they would fight back, and they would do so with everything they had. One particular operation, orchestrated by Terra herself, would go down in history as the first true victory for humanity. After months of reconnaissance and planning, the Resistance had discovered a vulnerable target, Zoltrak's command center, located deep within the remains of a city that had once been a bustling hub of human civilization. The Zoltraks had used this command center as a staging ground for their operations, coordinating the attacks that had decimated much of the world. The mission was risky. The Zoltraks held an iron grip on the area, and any attempt to infiltrate would likely result in instant death. But Terra had a plan. She had spent countless hours studying the enemy's movements, identifying their weaknesses. This wasn't just about brute force. It was about precision and timing. Every element had to fall into place, or humanity's first victory could quickly become its last stand. Terra's team was small but highly skilled. Fighters, engineers, hackers, and spies, each with a unique role to play in the mission. The plan was simple: infiltrate the command center, disable their communication systems, and plant a series of explosives that would cripple their operations. At the same time, a larger group of resistance forces would launch a diversionary attack on a nearby Zoltrak stronghold, drawing attention away from the main target. It was a high-risk strategy, but it was the best chance they had. The night of the operation, everything seemed to fall into place. The diversion worked flawlessly. As the Zoltrak's forces scrambled to deal with the rebel forces attacking their stronghold, Terra's team slipped into the command center unnoticed. They moved quickly and efficiently, neutralizing the guards with precise strikes and bypassing the security systems with the stolen alien technology they had been studying for months. Inside the heart of the command center, Terra's team planted the explosives, and with a final hack into the Zoltrak's network, they cut off all communications with the alien fleet. The center was paralyzed, but before they could leave, something unexpected happened. The Zoltraks realized that something was wrong and began sending reinforcements to the area. The clock was ticking. Terra knew they had mere minutes before the explosion would go off. But as the resistance fighters prepared to make their escape, they were confronted by a small group of Zoltrak soldiers. A firefight broke out, the sound of energy weapons and explosions filling the air. It was chaos, but the resistance held their ground. The timing of the explosion had to be perfect. Finally, with seconds to spare, the bombs detonated, collapsing the command center and sending shockwaves through the entire Zoltrak's operation. The enemy forces were thrown into disarray, their communications severed and their command structure crippled. The blast sent a powerful message to the invaders. Humanity was no longer powerless. They had struck a blow that would echo across the galaxy. As the dust settled and the team made their escape, Terra allowed herself a brief moment of relief. This was just the beginning, and there was still much to be done. But this victory was crucial. It was proof that humanity could strike back, that the Zoltraks weren't invincible, and that Earth's resistance was far from over. Across the globe, news of the attack spread like wildfire. The rebellion had scored its first victory. The resistance fighters, once scattered and small in number, now had hope, a belief that they could win. Cain Vorthan and his forces were not untouchable. The war was no longer a one-sided affair. The humans had proven they could win, and that was a game-changer. The Zoltraks would come for revenge, of course, but they would now understand that Earth was not an easy conquest, and as the world watched, a new wave of hope swept across the planet. The fight had only just begun, but this first victory had shown that the impossible was possible. The blast from the Zoltrak's command center had not only crippled the enemy's operations, but had also done something even more significant. It had given the resistance something they had desperately needed: confidence. Terra Valen's plan, against all odds, had succeeded. The Zoltraks were reeling, their coordination disrupted, and their once unshakable confidence now beginning to fracture. It was a rare and precious moment in war, a turning point. But Terra knew better than to get comfortable. This victory, while monumental, was only a small piece of the puzzle. The Zoltrax would retaliate in force, and their anger would be focused entirely on Earth. The human resistance had proved it could fight back, but it would need far more than this single win to ensure survival. Still, there was something different now, an undeniable shift. The human spirit, once crushed under the heel of the invaders, was rising again. Within hours of the command center's destruction, resistance cells across the world began to mobilize. Messages of the victory spread through encrypted channels, sparking a fire of defiance in cities and towns everywhere. People who had once thought the war hopeless now saw a path forward. More fighters, more engineers, and more civilians eager to contribute to the fight joined the cause. This was no longer a ragtag group of survivors. This was a global revolution. Terra worked tirelessly to capitalize on this momentum. The first priority was to reinforce the damaged infrastructure of the resistance. They needed more weapons, more supplies, and more recruits. There was no time to waste. The Zoltrax would regroup, and when they did, they would come down harder than ever before. Terra and her team worked around the clock, coordinating strikes, recruiting new members, and forming alliances with any surviving factions that could be useful. In one particularly daring operation, a group of resistance fighters managed to infiltrate a Zoltrax supply depot, stealing vital energy cells and weapons technology. It was a risky move, but it paid off. Humanity now had the means to level the playing field just a little bit more. As the weeks passed, the resistance began to organize themselves into more cohesive units, with clear leadership and structure. Terra was at the center of it all, not just as a commander, but as a symbol of humanity's defiance. Her vision for the resistance, combined with her strategic mind, made her the linchpin of this growing revolution. But even as hope spread, the Zoltrax retaliated with even greater ferocity. Cities were obliterated, entire regions wiped off the map. Cain Vorthan, still seething with rage over the destruction of his command center, ordered his fleet to crush the resistance once and for all. The Zoltrax, however, were not used to this kind of fight. They were accustomed to overwhelming their enemies with sheer force, to striking terror into their opponents. Now, for the first time, they were facing a foe that refused to bend, a foe that was learning, adapting, and fighting back with everything they had. Terra's strategy was clear: hit hard, hit fast, and leave the enemy scrambling. She knew the Zoltrax could not sustain this level of chaos indefinitely. They were not prepared for a prolonged guerrilla war. The more the resistance wore them down, the more they would falter. And every time the Zoltrax faltered, the human spirit grew stronger. One of the key successes during this time came in the form of a coordinated attack on a major Zoltrax supply ship. The ship was transporting vital resources, and its destruction would cripple the alien force's ability to sustain their operations. The mission was a success, and the explosion that ripped through the Zoltrax ship was felt across the galaxy. It was a symbolic victory, a demonstration that the resistance was no longer just reacting to the invaders, but was actively shaping the war in their favor. As the days turned to weeks, humanity's confidence continued to rise. The Zoltrax, once so sure of their inevitable victory, now found themselves grappling with an enemy that refused to give up. The resistance had begun to turn the tide. And though they were far from winning, they were no longer losing. The question now was not whether humanity could survive, but whether the Zoltrax could adapt to this new kind of warfare. Cain Vorthan had underestimated Earth. He had underestimated humanity. And that mistake would cost him dearly. The war was far from over, but for the first time, the balance of power was beginning to shift. The Zoltrax were not accustomed to failure. As their fleets regrouped and their forces tightened their grip on Earth, something began to change in their once unshakable confidence. Cain Vorthan, who had watched the devastation of Earth's cities with detached indifference, now found himself confronting something far more dangerous than the resistance fighters he had initially dismissed. A growing human unity, a relentless spirit that refused to break. It was a force he had never encountered in any of the worlds he had conquered, and it terrified him. Despite the Zoltrax's military superiority, their tight control over Earth's skies, and their seemingly endless resources, they could not deny the mounting pressure from the human rebellion. The destruction of critical supply lines, the sabotage of major operations, and the widespread uprising in every corner of the globe left the alien king reeling. His military was strong, but it was no longer invincible. Terra Valen knew the time had come to push for something more than small victories. The resistance had worn the Zoltrax down. Now, it was time to strike at the heart of the Empire. Vorthan's arrogance had already made one crucial mistake. He had underestimated the humans' resilience. But now, another opportunity had presented itself, and Terra was determined to use it to her advantage. The Resistance had learned of a potential vulnerability in the Zoltrax fleet, a high-ranking officer who had grown disillusioned with Vorthan's tyrannical rule. This officer, General Zarnak, had been a commander for many years, and had begun to question Vorthan's leadership as the war stretched on. His dissatisfaction had been growing, especially after the destruction of the command center and the series of human victories that followed. Terra saw an opportunity to exploit Zarnak's disillusionment. If they could convince him to join the Resistance, or at the very least, to sabotage his own people, they could destabilize Vorthan's control from within. Terra sent her most trusted spies to make contact with Zarnak. The plan was risky. The general was a highly placed figure within the Zoltrax military, and his defection would be seen as treasonous. But if it worked, it would be a blow to Vorthan's power. It was a gamble that had to be taken. Time was running out, and the Resistance needed every edge it could get. Zarnak, after some tense meetings and careful negotiations, agreed to cooperate. His loyalty to the Zoltrax was waning, and he had come to see Vorthan's leadership as the true source of their failure. With Zarnak's inside knowledge, the Resistance was able to launch an unexpected attack on the Zoltrax's primary command ship, the *** Dread Sovereign ***. The ship was the heart of Vorthan's fleet and housed some of the most advanced technology the Zoltrax had. If they could cripple it, they would deal a devastating blow to the entire alien war effort. The operation was swift and brutal. Terra led her elite squad in an assault on the Dread Sovereign, using Zarnak's insider information to disable the ship's defenses and gain access to its critical systems. The Zoltrax, caught off guard by the boldness of the attack, struggled to respond. It was a perfect storm of human ingenuity, strategy, and sheer will. As the Resistance fighters planted explosives and sabotaged the ship's systems, they found themselves face to face with Vorthan's personal guard. A battle broke out inside the ship, and despite being outnumbered, the humans fought with a ferocity the Zoltrax had not anticipated. Terra herself confronted Vorthan's lieutenant, a fierce alien warrior known as Karath, in hand-to-hand combat. The fight was brutal, but Terra's tactical mind and unmatched determination won out. The *** Dread Sovereign finally fell, its systems disabled and its command structure in disarray. The message to Vorthan was clear. The humans were no longer simply fighting for survival. They were actively dismantling his empire. As the Dread Sovereign burned and its crew scrambled to respond to the chaos, the rebellion's success was broadcasted across the globe. The message was clear. Humanity was on the rise, and the Zoltrax's reign was crumbling. The once unthinkable was now a reality. The tide had turned. King Vorthan's once indomitable power was starting to waver. His grip on Earth was slipping, and every passing day, more and more of his soldiers questioned his leadership. Terra Valen's strategy, her determination, and the unyielding spirit of the human resistance were beginning to unravel the empire Vorthan had built. The question was no longer whether Earth would survive. It was how long Vorthan could hold on before he faced the inevitable. The fall of the tyrant. The fall of the Dread Sovereign sent shockwaves through the Zoltrax fleet, and the earth-shattering explosion of their most powerful warship was a blow they had not anticipated. The alien empire, once so confident in their ability to crush humanity, was now in disarray. Vorthen's grip on Earth had become tenuous at best. It was no longer just a matter of survival for the humans. It was a matter of reclaiming their planet, and they were more determined than ever. King Vorthen, consumed with rage and fear, retreated to his flagship, the *** Scourge of Zoltra, the last bastion of his authority. His forces were scattered, his supply lines shattered, and his own soldiers were starting to lose faith in him. The once feared king had become a hunted animal, desperate to hold on to the empire he had so ruthlessly built. Terra Valen, now hailed as the leader of humanity's resistance, knew that the final confrontation was approaching. She gathered her most trusted commanders, all of whom had fought bravely in the weeks since the victory over the *** Dread Sovereign ***. They were battle-worn, but they had a fire in their eyes. This was the moment they had fought for. The time to end the war was drawing near. "We have them on the ropes," Terra said, her voice steady but filled with urgency. "The Zoltrax are fractured, their leadership in chaos. Now is the time to strike, before they can regroup." The plan was simple but risky. The resistance would mount an all-out assault on the Scourge of Zoltra, the heart of Vorthen's remaining military might. But the challenge was enormous. The Scourge was heavily fortified and surrounded by a vast armada of Zoltrax warships. The resistance had no hope of matching the alien fleet in size or firepower, but Terra had learned long ago that victory wasn't always about strength. It was about strategy, about exploiting weaknesses, and using every advantage to your benefit. Terra's team would infiltrate the Scourge of Zoltra's stealth technology and sabotage its core systems, crippling its ability to defend itself. Meanwhile, the rest of the human forces would launch a massive diversionary attack on the remaining Zoltrax warships. The goal was simple: divide and conquer. With Vorthen's flagship rendered vulnerable, the final blow could be struck. The night of the assault, the skies above Earth crackled with energy. The resistance launched their ships into the heart of the alien fleet, engaging in one of the largest space battles the world had ever seen. As human fighters clashed with Zoltrax vessels, Terra's elite squad slipped past the chaos, invisible to the alien sensors. Inside the Scourge of Zoltra, time was running out. Terra and her team fought their way through the ship's heavily guarded corridors, hacking through security systems and laying explosives along the way. Every step forward felt like a victory, but every corner held the threat of sudden death. The Zoltrax were desperate to protect their king, and their guards fought with a brutal intensity. At the heart of the Scourge, Terra confronted Vorthen. The king was no longer the confident ruler he had once been. His once pristine armor was scorched, and his eyes burned with fury and desperation. "You think you've won, human?" Vorthen spat, his voice dripping with venom. "This is only a small defeat. You cannot defeat the Zoltrax. We are eternal." Terra stepped forward, her voice calm but resolute. "You're wrong, Vorthen. It's over. Your empire is finished. Earth is ours." With a final, defiant roar, Vorthen lunged at her, but Terra was quicker. Using a combination of her training and alien technology, she disabled the king's personal weapons system and forced him into a corner. The battle was over. The tyrant was defeated. As Terra's team planted the final set of charges to destroy the *** Scourge of Zoltra, the rest of the resistance forces launched a full-scale assault, driving the remaining Zoltrax forces off Earth. With Vorthen's death, the enemy forces crumbled. The once mighty Zoltrax empire had collapsed in the wake of its greatest leader's fall. Across the world, humanity erupted in celebration. The war was over. Earth had been reclaimed. The sacrifice of countless lives, the pain and suffering, had led to this moment of triumph. For the first time in years, there was peace. Terra stood among her people, knowing that their struggle had not been in vain. The world had been saved, not by superior technology, but by the unbreakable spirit of humanity. The resistance had turned the tide. And now, Earth was free. The war was over, and humanity had won.